Chris Tabbert.
And I am Thomas. And we will be judging these three, and we are looking forward and excited for this. All right, so our first contestant today is Ava Thomas. So Ava, if you would go ahead and take the podium.
Am I supposed to introduce myself? Hello, my name is Ava Thomas, and I'm here to present my thesis. Let's begin. Criminal profiling is necessary to keep our society safe from violent crimes. They have years of learning about the basics in school. A bachelor's, master's, or doctorate are enough education to qualify an individual to move on to their training. In college, while studying criminal justice and psychology, they can learn first about what is required of them, and second, how the criminal will think. After graduating, they have the opportunity to enroll in a training agency that tests their education, pushes their physical limits, and puts them in realistic environments. All of this to ultimately raise them up as strong leaders in law enforcement. And even after both of these steps, a certain level of experience must be endured to gain them a profiling career exactly where they have a passion for. A little over a decade is a common amount of time spent to support the statement that they're qualified. Profilers take psychology for a reason too. When finally obtaining a criminal profiling job, they use their keen observation skills and deduce what they know from how psychology teaches them how a person responds. They use it everywhere, on the field, during questioning, and even in the courtroom. They can tell many things from a crime scene based on how it's left and where it is. When helping detectives and police interview suspects, techniques are offered and used to bring out the most honest response for the type of person in front of them. And when in the courtroom, these criminal profilers can be called in as expert witnesses or to evaluate the guilty person on trial. This was all officially set into place in the 1970s after the idea of profiling was used and succeeded its case. In the late 1950s, a man by the name of James A. Russell, a psychiatrist, was called into a 16-year manhunt for a malicious bomber for his help in catching the terrorist. Russell needed to try things in a different form. It almost seemed crazy. But this psychological way of figuring out criminals changed how we do things today and are even more effective. Criminal profiling is necessary to keep our society safe from violent crimes. They have the education, the training, and the experience. We need to trust them if our personal lives become a part of a crime, and not just when it happens to others. And most importantly, you need to understand the extent of what these people do to save our society. They're here for us.
Well, okay, thank you. Thank you. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for being here and doing this today. So I'm just going to open up for our judges. If you have any questions you'd like to go ahead and ask, please start.
Okay, I'll start. Early in your paper, you mentioned that people might bash profilers, or that the country, like you referenced that our country allow them to do their jobs. And I was curious if you found anything in your research about groups or specific opposition to criminal profilers.
Yes. So in research specifically, not particularly, the reason that I chose this specifically was for lots of places on social media are very adamant on bashing, using the word that I used, bashing a lot of law enforcement, especially with these cases coming up, with just how they do their job and how they put things into place, especially even in personal lives. Everybody will come across, and also that's something that I saw, people just discriminating how they do their job just because they are uncomfortable with the policies that they use. So according to the research, unfortunately not particularly, that wasn't something that I looked into, but personally that is something that I think I know everybody sees in their lives.
follow up on that just a little bit. A little further down, you talk about the preventative value of profiling as compared to just the forensic or crime solving. How do you see the preventive aspect of this playing out? How would a profiler be involved in preventing crime?
Can you repeat the last part of that question? Sorry.
Okay. First page, third paragraph. Criminal profiling is necessary to keep our society safe from violent crimes. Now, if there's a crime committed, I understand how profiling would help to solve the crime, get the offender and so forth. But as far as keeping society safe, this idea of preventing a crime, how would that play out?
Yeah, so bringing in the definition of a criminal profiler, specifically what we're talking about is offender profiling, which is defined as the investigative strategy to apprehend or find out a criminal, so as they can use the psychological factors to stop something from happening again. So bringing that into your question, it helps to prevent crimes from their research based on how they have done things and how they know that criminals respond and act, so that they can look at the criminals in our world today and see what the common factors with it are, and they can stop it before it happens. They can get them help so they can keep an eye on them, things like that.
So I may have a twofold question for you. So let me, as I read through your paper and going through the profiling aspect of it, would you say, according to your research and everything that you have found, would you say that profiling and stereotyping were similar or different?
Do you mean like the stereotypes of the criminal profilers? Are they the same or the job?
Good. I should be clear, yes. Actually, I'm thinking more of looking at the criminals themselves. I mean, are we stereotyping them? Are we profiling? Is there a difference between that? As I read the paper, it became a little clear to me that stereotyping and profiling are similar, but I'm curious what your research has shared. One seems to be a buzzword and the other seems to be accepted.
Yeah. So stereotyping the criminal profiler definitely is, or not the profiler, the criminal, is definitely something that our world does, and we can judge a lot of people based on their ethnicity, their actions. We can judge how they might be a criminal based on what they do, how they look. However, stereotyping as in specific actions that they do and saying, hey, you're going to be a criminal because you did that, I almost want to say we underestimate. If you look at the bomber case that I have discussed in the paper, there were very clear signs as to the fact that he was going to become a criminal, everything that he dealt with in his past, and the fact that he was even simply a paranoid schizophrenic and never got the help for that, had the Oedipus complex where he was attracted to his mom. All of those were very sure telling signs that, hey, he needs help, and if he doesn't get help, things are going to escalate. It was almost underestimated of him how much he was going to spiral out. So while stereotyping can be an issue, in very many cases as well, it is almost underestimated.
So profiling is, I'm hearing you say profiling is different than stereotyping. I mean, because what would the difference then be from that? Maybe education, maybe experience. How does it set itself apart then from me going out and saying, oh, you're tall, you're wearing pink, and so your sister must have given you that top today, right? I
Good
just don't
question.
know. What's the difference in that? I
Yes,
guess?
good question. So, in my first point, why they're qualified, obviously, we have talked about the years and years that they go through trying to study how to do their job better than citizens on the street want to say, hey, you're wearing a pink top, your sister gave that to you. Criminal profilers will take more things into account, possibly saying, hey, that's not your style. Did somebody give that to you? Rather than just saying, I've never seen that shirt before, right? So why they're qualified is because of the amount of years that they've gone through. They've gone through 4 or more years of education in their college career. They've gone through multiple months and weeks of hardcore training in their FBI agency, and even after that, 7 to 15 years of experience on the field doing just more low-key work. Their amount of experience is there to help them be able to judge people and their actions more accurately than somebody on the street would be able to.
Could you explain some differences between a detective and a criminal profiler? Because it just seemed very interesting to me that why aren't criminal profilers detectives if they're so good at recognizing subtle differences?
Yeah. So more often I believe in the bigger cities, there is the distinction between detective and criminal profiler. The detective is more of an on-the-field person. They have their certified badge, and they will go on the field, and they are the people who have the rights to arrest and to specifically go and get warrants to go and investigate an area. Criminal profilers are more of the strategic response. They help figure out who might be the person, how to apprehend. They are the how-to guys instead of the people who do the actions particularly.
I'd like to follow up on the question distinguishing stereotyping and profiling, especially going back to the idea of preventing or anticipating that someone might be an at-risk person. In your reading and preparation, did you find much on concerns about civil liberties, that if a person fit a certain profile, or if a group of people fit a certain profile, that there was any risk or concerns about law enforcement targeting that group? I'm thinking both in terms of criminal and in the political sphere, things like potential terrorist attacks or terrorism. Did you find much on that?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Okay. It was not mentioned in the paper, however, I did have some research based on that. In Estrick Jones' book that I have cited as one of my first sources they give more accurate accounts to their crimes investigated. She talked a lot about, hey, here are the stereotypes for specific people, but she did also mention that, you have to be careful. You don't persecute them immediately. And even with the Bomber case, we see that you've got to be really careful with persecuting paranoid schizophrenics. You have to be very careful how you go about things. A lot of people do tend to just go right for it and judge them off the bat and do what they think is necessary. But again, that comes back to those are citizens doing that and not a profiler doing that. The profiler is specifically trained to know how to deal with it, to know how to take the steps forward, such as possibly not just apprehending them right off the bat or telling them that they're doing the wrong thing off the bat. They just simply keep an eye on things and make sure that everything is legal, and they know how to tell when somebody's going to break. Yeah.
Well, you referenced your case study of Mad Bomber. I found that very fascinating as we begin to read through this. And I know there's other cases such as this, but I guess my question is, in your research, and maybe this is a tough question to answer, but have you found how much time is saved by using profiling? I mean, I know that's probably a tough stat to pull, but just I remember seeing how long they had worked on the Mad Bomber case versus when the profiler came in and was able to do that in a short amount of time. Are there any other stats that you had found, or even reference Mad Bomber if you'd like, about the amount of time that is saved by the use of profiling?
Yeah, no stats specifically were brought today. However, to reference the Mad Bomber, that was when the criminal profiling program was officially kickstarted, and it was their test run when they first started, which turned a 16-year manhunt into a 1-year hunt, right? The Mad Bomber was very malicious, very known for keeping himself hidden. Nobody knew what he looked like. They knew nothing about him except for the letters that he wrote and that he addressed himself as FP. By bringing the psychiatrist in, he figured everything out in the time amount of like 4 hours. He just by looking at his letters and basing what he knew the bomber was already like. So instead of diagnosing him by his, they diagnosed him by his actions instead of taking his actions to decipher what he was going to do next. They worked backwards and did everything and figured nearly everything out in 4 hours. It did take an additional 8 months. I don't know, I'm sorry. It took them an additional 8 months to actually apprehend the Mad Bomber, whose name is George Batesky. That's just the first example that I have. I do know it has done great things for the country, especially for violent crimes. We are more often than not lost if we don't have a grounded strategy to think from.
And I want to ask a follow-up to Chris's question. This is, when it comes to profiling, is there, what steps? Because it is easy, I think, when it comes to certain groups, just gender groups or sociological groups, just whoever it may be. How do you prepare? How do you present that this is not an attack on a certain group of people, especially if you're in a court of law, right? Or how do you do some preparation work behind the scenes to prove that you're not targeting a certain group of people? Because, I mean, that's kind of what stereotyping is doing, right? We're targeting because you look a certain way, you act a certain way. How do you prepare against that to be able to set yourself up as the authority, not just trying to target something?
Can I have 1 second? So one of the most popular things to use, and this is specifically during questioning after you have found all of your suspects and you want to bring them in for questioning, just to be able to tell who would be most likely out of the suspects to have done a crime or is about to do a crime, something that was considered. One of the most popular techniques to use is called the Reed technique. So the Reed technique is, it has multiple steps, the first one being factual analysis. It requires some evaluation. Essentially, they will take each suspect individually and deduce and evaluate what their probable guilt was, and as well as their innocence to the crime, which extend but also are not limited to gender, race, occupation, and marital status. So while it may seem as if it's stereotyping, taking all these things into consideration, it is very, sometimes it is very necessary to see, okay, what kind of setting were you in? Were you in a place where, are you a black person in a white neighborhood and the crime was committed? It is there only to help, not to convict. So as for stereotyping, you can't just say, hey, this black person was in a white neighborhood and a white child died. Since he's the black person in the neighborhood, he was the one who did it. You have to consider what area they were in, what ethnicity of area they were in, or if they've had really bad relationships in the past and they were at a group therapy where everybody was in a relationship and talking about their relationships instead of his singleness. If something were to happen in that specific area and they just assume that this person who has had a terrible time with relationships lashed out on everybody, they just need to consider all the surroundings.
You made an interesting statement just now about bringing in someone that's about to commit a crime. Where is the line and the help in that process? Most of your paper refers to bringing justice to a criminal profiler, helping to bring justice to society and to a person that has already committed the crime. What does it look like on the preventative end if they're bringing someone in that is about to?
Yeah, so what I mean by about to, I definitely should have defined that a little bit more carefully, is more of the if something has happened and they know something's going to happen again. They bring in all the suspects that could have done it and might do it again. Even if it was something a little smaller that they know could extend or escalate to something even bigger, they'll bring people in and make sure that everything's still okay.
Excuse me, a lot of the information in your paper, you were very thorough on looking at the qualifications and the education and preparation for profilers. Given that usually with law enforcement, the first ones on the scene are the local law enforcement, then it escalates. I am curious if you have any idea, and you mentioned the FBI as being primary in training profilers, compared to law enforcement across the country, are there a lot of profilers, a few? Do they work mostly for the FBI, or do they work in local police stations? How many are there?
Yeah, it's a somewhat private work of study, so the stats are not known to me. However, as I said earlier, I do believe they are in the bigger cities, and I believe there might be a limit of 5 per city, possibly. If you have a huge city like Chicago, you might have more than 5 in different departments, or just more than 5 in total. The stats are not known to me specifically, though.
So you see them not so much in smaller local police departments or sheriff's offices.
Yes.
But this is something at a higher level, state level, or federal level?
Yeah,
Are they
criminal.
independent?
Sorry. Yes, criminal profilers are more often used for violent crimes, bigger cases, which is what we're talking about. So when I defined it as an offender profiler, that specifically, most smaller towns wouldn't have the money to be able to hire detectives, police officers, and a profiler. So it is more common for them to be in bigger cities.
So, why this topic? What sparked this? I don't say because Mom made me pick something. So, what sparked this?
I wanted to be a criminal profiler. That was my 1.5 long plan. And I wanted to get to know the area of study a lot more before I fully jumped in. After getting to know a lot about what it entails and all the years of experience, I really admire the job, but I don't think I could handle it.
I'd like to know your opinion on something.
No point.
I was very impressed with the amount of education that it takes and the extra training, the academies that they go to. But I was very intrigued by the fact that they have all the education, then the FBI Academy, and then they have to go back almost to square one for all the experience. In most careers, you get your education, and then you have 2, 3, 4 years of experience, and then you further your training. What is your opinion on the order of how that process works for a criminal profiler?
I definitely trust the process a lot more than if I hadn't known that that was the process. Because they go through so much, I do put my trust in them a lot more. I do think they are very reliable people for how much they go through. I mean, again, I myself don't particularly want to do that much, just because it does feel like you keep starting over. However, because of their dedication, I really admire the work that they do, and I do 100% believe that they are very reliable people.
Well, I really enjoyed picking up on the fact you had a lot of enthusiasm
Yeah.
for this. You're an advocate of this, and that's neat. But as you said, maybe that's not your career direction at this point. Was there anything or some things that, as you got into this, really surprised you that you had no idea that the profilers were involved in?
I'm not sure there was anything that I was surprised that they weren't involved in, because since I didn't really have an idea of exactly what they were involved in, nothing really surprised me. However, definitely some of the research surprised me. For example, when talking about the serial killers, Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, definitely scared me, especially doing it at night. Definitely really scares the wits out of you.
You already expounded a little bit on, did you pronounce it the read or ride technique?
I pronounce it the read.
Okay, the
I could
read
be wrong.
technique. You already expounded on that a little bit, but I was hoping you could give me more of the steps for the interrogation process.
Yes. Let me find it real quick.
Page 8 and 9.
Oh, thank you. So do you mean just more than what I explained in the paper?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. Just refreshing myself, sorry. So the read technique is a very psychological technique to use, probably one of the most psychological techniques that they use, which is why it more often becomes most effective. If you're not careful enough with it, it almost manipulates a person to respond exactly how you want them to respond, and not in the best of ways. So there are issues sometimes with the read technique depending on who is using it. If somebody is not very knowledgeable in how to use it, they shouldn't be using it. I mean, as I've said in the paper, it's a very, they determine your probable guilt and what your innocence of the crime might be. They'll do a behavioral analysis interview to detect the verbal and nonverbal behavior towards just very laid-back questions concerning their life and all. And then the last step is just consisting of many steps in and of itself to slyly go from one question to another. So something you can think of, which might not be completely accurate, but might be the best way to quickly interpret it, is when you watch like a crime show, right? And they go into the investigation and they start with, hey, you want a glass of water? And they're just very nice about everything. And the person will start to get a little bit more laid back and okay. And so then they start asking about family or whatever. And sometimes that's not the best way to go depending on who's in front of you. But just starting with very casual questions that will give you information that they don't know that they're giving you. Is the best way to go. I mean, you won't always start off the interview saying, would you like a glass of water? But something kind, good cop, bad cop, isn't a real life thing that is necessary or effective to use. The psychological way of learning things, always sort of playing good cop, is probably your best bet. Just so that you, if they do have an unknown mental problem, you won't be setting them off by fluctuating your own emotions so quickly and heavily.
Come back to another question on the preparation and the education and so forth. A lot of emphasis on law enforcement background and so forth. But if I understand, an awful lot of the actual work is what we might call more psychological. Is there, in addition to law enforcement, what kind of a background in psychological training? Your first case here, which I found to be fascinating too, was actually a psychiatrist that came into this. What would they be looking at for a profiler in terms of that kind of preparation?
Yeah, so as I stated in the paper, they do, in college, they go through a double major in psychology as well as the criminal justice. So as far as what the college will teach in psychology is either based on the college or just what they teach. I can't say for certain exactly what psychology will go over. Because that is not something that I specifically looked into. I forgot where I was going with this. So they have the knowledge of the psychology from college, but then they'll put it to good use when they go into the FBI Academy to sort of almost put it to work and kind of learn the techniques and the ways to do it instead of just having all the facts. And the psychology is more used to determine people's actions. So when the psychiatrist came on board, it was, hey, we need you to evaluate this person based on what they did. The psychiatrist used his skills to backtrack for the bomber. So instead of saying, hey, you've got this illness, this is what you're going to do. It was like, this is what you've done, what's your illness? Just all through psychological thinking. Yeah, so that's how it helps, but their training specifically will come from college and the academy.
So would you say that, excuse me, pardon me, that aspect of it is what sets apart the profiler from forensic detectives and forensic scientists? That's the extra dimension that is necessary to be a good profiler? Or is it more just the experience of dealing with these kinds of cases?
Yeah, so in my research, I will say terms are thrown around a lot. between criminal profiling and forensic profiling, as well as criminal psychologist. Terms are thrown about every which way. There, you have to be very, very intentful when you're looking into how you're defining things and what places you're going on, like websites, books, whatever you're doing, to know that you're getting the exactly what you're talking about. So to my knowledge, the psychology is really what puts apart or sets apart a forensic and a profiler apart. So to my knowledge, that is. But if you were to look into it yourself, you have to be very intentful with how you are looking into it.
Do you think that criminal profiling as a job has changed much from the beginning of someone who is completely a psychologist brought in and has a background and all of his experience was in a clinic treating patients, talking to patients, versus now a criminal profiler who has more law enforcement experience?
Yeah, so the program has definitely changed. When they first brought the guy in, it was out on a whim. They were saying, hey, let's bring a psychiatrist in, and everybody thought that this guy, Captain Finney, the guy who's the lead on the case, they thought he was crazy for bringing a psychiatrist in, because it was the 1950s. It was a very big thing to just bring a psychiatrist in, because they didn't have any experience in law enforcement. However, as time went on, when they found out that this technique really does work, they spent almost 20 years to develop how to gear this technique specifically towards criminal profiling. It was in the 1970s when they finally released a program specifically for criminal profilers. And since then, it has only grown and gotten more accurate.
I have to say that I was really intrigued by your whole approach here. And I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. And it occurs to me that he was more forensic, and what you're describing really goes a little bit different, more to motive or to category of the background. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Thank you.
I love your use of the cases in here. To be able to pull it all together and kind of draw a line through it all, I thought you had some great information. As I was going through this, I did not know all the education and everything that it takes to go through here. Even just the training in, learning to shoot a gun, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't even think about the aspects of that, but there is some dangers even within this. So I just wanted to thank you for being able to put this time and everything together, because I just felt like it was a very informative moment for us to be able to get a glimpse into something we don't usually think a lot about. So, and the need for it, and for you to be very specific with it. So thank you for how you've written it and what you've done. Thanks.
Just one final thing. Do you watch detective shows on TV very much?
That is another.
How real is that they solve the problem in 60 minutes?
Oh, geez. Not real at all.
Not real.
Dude, no. I do watch them a lot, though.
You do. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Ava, and a great job. Thank you for being here today. Great job. We're going to take just a couple minute break. Our next participant, our next presenter, ready, and grab anything you guys need if you need a bathroom break or what have you. We'll get ready with judges and get ready.
Testing.
one is, I've turned you up, but just bring it,
I'll get
I mean, yeah. just-
Testing. Is that,
I'll turn one of these around. I've got you turned all the way up.
okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. If I'm talking at this volume close to the microphone, can you hear me?
You're welcome. Funny for me. I'll just put an extra one up here.
Chris, if you want to try one more time into that, I've turned the monitor on.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
That ought to help. Is that better?
Gracie, are you listening? You need to talk a little more loudly, too. Johnny Cash.
Okay.
It should register right.
Hello?
Here, hold it. Now you're gonna talk.
Okay, so, testing. It's kind of quiet, but now it's loud. Okay. Okay, so, so this morning I woke up and then I had to pick some clothes, which was really hard because I don't like, it's hard unless it's sweatpants, so rough life. Let's try to keep talking. And then I ate some kiwi, for real, and then I had some turkey, and then I had some strawberries.
Gracie, speak clearly.
I am speaking clearly. And I think so.
Count. 1,
1,
2.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, I can hear that.
Should I put it in my pocket? Is it still? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, we want to welcome to the podium, to the stand, Grace Iron, and we want to thank you again for your work and preparation as you come into this, so we're just going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As you just said, my name is Grace Iwan. Today, I will be talking to you about my thesis paper on how sugar is one of the great downfalls of productivity in our society. Sugar is defined as a food carbohydrate interpreted by the human taste buds as sweet. The scope of sugar includes additive sugars and natural sugars. Sugar is eaten in copious amounts in America. The way our society treats sugar causes obesity, mental health problems, and a wide variety of health issues. Sugar causes so many health problems to develop that it can prevent us from concentrating on the important things in life, like school, work, family, and loved ones. Sugar affects the way children develop and think. It causes health issues that consume people's daily lives, and it causes much disruption to the body as a whole. With all of the issues that sugar causes, people cannot function to their maximum capacity. The day when people put to action the fact that we could become so much more efficient as a people without sugar in our diets is going to be a great step in the right direction for society.
I'd like to start first by asking your reasons for writing this paper and why you chose the topic, and I can tell you're very passionate about it. Where did that passion come from?
I just think, for me, like a long time ago, I went without sugar for I want to say a year, just because I was having a lot of gut problems and stuff. And I remember it made me think so much clearer, and I felt so much better. Obviously, right now, I'm eating sugar like a regular American, but I remember how great I felt, and I thought it would just be really interesting to research it more and see how it really does affect everyone.
Grace, I guess I'm going to hit you with the big question up front. This is very comprehensive.
Okay.
You made a very strong case against sugar. Is there anything good about it, other than the flavor?
I think that sugar, the way that we treat it in America, it's a great way to bring people together. Just because I think food as a whole, it brings people together, in events and holidays and going out for ice cream or whatever. And I think people like to talk about it too, oh, this food is great, whatever. And I think that sugar is, I think people love sugar, clearly. So I think that, yeah, it can bring people together in a way.
So I like your topic. It's something that even in our family we've had a lot of discussions and things go through. And this is a very specific to a broader topic. I mean, we could go in multiple nutritional ways in this. One of the things I like as you, on page 1, what you do, as you reference it, you talk about our sweet tooths kind of rule the way we do things. And I think each one of us can say, yeah. We really like that. But even down to the point of not just what we think, but even in literature. I found your point there on page 1, paragraph 4, very interesting, that sugar in general has been part of the human culture and history. Even within our literature, you talk about the Odyssey, classic literature, that says, never has any man passed this way in his dark vessel and left unheard the honey-sweet music from our lips. And as I begin to read about that, I kind of begin to think, wow, it's kind of been ingrained into us. And then you took it a step further, and you said, well, even the Bible uses honey for imagery, such as a land flowing with milk and honey. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth out of Psalms. So knowing all this, I mean, I know there's some good, and Chris just asked it, you know, and there's some good things about sugar and what have you. Knowing all of this, though, as we begin to read through the paper, it's a loaded question, I'm sorry. How do we, if we know, maybe we don't, but if we know it's bad, why do we use it? I mean, why, and there again, maybe it's just ingrained into us, but what can we do then to get the word or stop? What do we do?
To
Not use it anymore, but to maybe reprogram our own minds to not,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
what do we do?
that's, I mean, I think that's one of the things is that it's almost, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to remove sugar from your life. And like you were saying, like it's even in the Bible, like it's part of life even. So I don't think it is possible to completely remove it, especially in our culture. Sugar is just, it's in everything. Like you can't escape it no matter what. But I think there are definitely steps that we can take to reduce the amount of sugar we have, which I think that's definitely beneficial to at least even reduce the amount of sugar we're eating. So just like making sure you're eating like proper foods, that like whole foods that aren't processed with tons of sugar in it, just things like that.
You know, and as you were talking, it just kind of hit me that your position may not necessarily be, hey, let's get rid of it all.
Right.
It may be more of a, I just lost the word, moderation.
Yeah,
Kind of an idea. Okay.
I think, yeah.
Part of your thesis is very direct about productivity in our society. You mentioned that in the very first sentence, and even in the second paragraph, that it is a huge problem that has a very negative effect on general human productivity. How would you define and describe, how would you quantify human productivity?
Just like when we're working, like being able to focus well, and on schoolwork, being able to just like comprehend everything and take everything in. I think that sugar like slows down our brain function. So that's a huge thing. And I had one study of, I think it was Brown Mills Elementary, that was talking about they banned sugar from lunchrooms, and the children weren't allowed to bring it in. And as soon as they did that, all the children's test scores went up by like, I want to say 20 or 30%, which was crazy. Yeah. So yeah, just like mostly just like the focus, and then I think if people's brains are not completely fogged up, then we'll be able to do things in our regular lives to the maximum capacity that we should be able to.
Grace, quite a bit on page 11, or at least my page 11, you talk about the impact of the need for sugar as glucose in the body, and you go on in a couple places to talk about high blood sugar, low blood sugar, and so forth. Can you talk a little bit in just basic terms, the relationship between the need for sugar and what the dietary sugar as opposed to blood sugar, and how those two relate?
Yeah, so glucose, that is the kind of sugar that we need in our body to help our brain function. So glucose is found in like fruits, for instance. So you do need fruits, but fructose, that is the bad sugar that, I don't know exactly, fructose can only be processed by the liver, and it's harmful to your body. But it's glucose that your brain needs to function. And I want to say it doesn't, I think it changes your blood sugar levels, but not to the extent that fructose does.
So if I eat a bunch of glucose, will I function better or worse? What will that do to my blood sugar levels?
I mean, I can't say for sure, but I'm going to take a guess that depends on the person. Just like probably age and gender and whatnot. So that's my guess.
You reference, we talk about this in realms of physical, and you've already referenced the mental side of it. As I read through it, you had a case study, I think it was in, what was it, 1994, that found results-related dementia to obesity with that. Could you expound just a little bit on that? And as you do, just talk about the mental health, not just the physical health, but even the mental health aspect of maybe what sugar does to us, to our mental capacities a little bit more. And kind of the follow-up, you just, I think, answered my other question, but guys and girls are all made up differently, right? Men and women are. Is this more gender specific to women versus men, or men versus women, and what have you?
I didn't find any research on if it affects men and women differently. I mean, I'm guessing it does to an extent, but not to such a great extent that I found it in my research. Yeah. And then the whole mental side, that's a big part of the whole thing, just because it causes that brain fog. Could you repeat that part of your question?
Yeah, I just wondered if you could just go into just a little bit more for, especially everyone who hadn't read the paper, just the mental health, how it affects the brain, and maybe how it rewires our mental health.
Yeah.
Even leading to, I mean, because when I read that it could lead to dementia, I'm thinking, I already have a hard enough time remembering things now.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could just expand a bit on that.
Let me find the page where I talk about that.
Page 7 for you.
7.
Yeah, 7 and 8. 8 is where I was.
Oh, okay. Okay. Losing my papers. Okay, so to start with, so there's something called homeostasis, which is it's like the natural rhythms of the body. I'm trying to find where I read about that. Too many papers. But if the homeostasis, so sugar throws off homeostasis, I can't find it, which is the balance of chemicals in your body. So sugar throws that off, and that can cause people to become emotionally unstable, just because it's throwing off the chemicals in your body, which I think that plays a huge effect into being able to focus on things just when the emotional side of your brain isn't working properly. But then for memory loss, so eating a high diet in sugar can have an effect on your hippocampus, which is where memories are stored. So in my paper I wrote, sugar metabolism creates end products that directly attack nerve endings, which constricts blood flow to the brain, which results in brain cells being killed. When brain cells are killed, the result is slower and damaged brain function. Once the brain damage hits a certain point, it can be classified as dementia. So basically sugar causes our brains to be slowly decaying, which if you think about it, like dentists are always telling you, like, don't eat sugar, like it's gonna decay your teeth or whatnot. It has the same effect to your body as a whole. It's quite literally decaying your brain because of the constricting of blood flow. So, yeah.
Highly addictive.
Yes, it's highly addictive. Yeah, even, I think I wrote in there that it's for cocaine addicts. If they did a study on rats. I don't think I wrote this in my paper, but they got rats, the same rats addicted to cocaine and sugar at the same time, and every time that the rats were given a choice between cocaine and sugar, the rats always picked sugar. Yeah, so, which is quite interesting, I think.
question regarding sugar and obesity,
Mm-hmm.
and also how it tied in. I loved your sentence where it said sugar is sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter if it's artificial or glucose or fructose, your body metabolizes it, and it's still, your body reacts to it no matter what form, it's sugar. I've heard people say that, well, if I exercise, I can eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
So how does exercise play into the obesity and sugar intake?
So I didn't research this side a ton, but I mean, of course, exercising, that like you use up calories in your body, which sugar is calories, because calories just translates to energy. So sugar is energy in your body, but at the same time, sugar, I mean, even personally, if I eat a ton of sugar, then I feel weighed down when I'm dancing or exercising or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think that, but at the same time, sugar is an energizer. So, if you eat sugar, then you'll feel energized for short term, but eventually you're going to hit that sugar crash and your blood sugar is going to drop and it's not going to help you in the long term. So, when people say that, I don't think it's very accurate just because you should be eating whole proteins, which will give your muscles energy that will actually help you in exercise. And then, I mean, if you are obese and you have a sugar addiction, you should exercise, even if you are eating sugar. Either way, that'll help you out. But I think reducing intake of sugar will help, and you shouldn't just eat whatever you want because it's not going to help you. Either way.
Grace, you've got a lot of good research here that you went through. I know many times when you read articles that are real pro-something or anti-something, sometimes the causes, or what people understand is, well, this causes this, is not always as clearly defined as things that go along with things. Let me give you an example. Several of your studies said in certain number of years, obesity increased, or this became more of a problem, or that became more of a problem. And the idea seems to be, well, sugar is definitely causing these things. Did you find anything in your research where the articles indicated it could be a factor, in the sense that if I sit on the couch all day long and eat Twinkies and watch television, maybe it's the sitting on the couch all day long that's more of a problem than eating the Twinkies? Did your research really separate those kind of things out we could understand?
In all of the articles and books I read, none of them really separated that out per se. But I think that's definitely, I think that's part of it. But at the same time, sugar causes you to want to, at the same part, it's like personality and what you want to do. But I think sugar can also cause you to want to just sit around and do nothing because you feel lazy, because the sugar is causing you to feel unmotivated. So, I think it could really be a huge part in it, just wanting to just sit around and do nothing.
Did you find any research that said, no, the Twinkies aren't that bad?
No.
No? Okay.
It definitely didn't.
Too bad.
Yeah. No.
So I like your question as you close it up. You said, where does this leave us? Where does this leave us? And as you've been presenting here just in the past few moments, my thought goes to education somehow, right? How to educate. In your paper, you had mentioned what is ironic about society's new ideas of embracing obesity and health issues by promoting body positivity. That for centuries, overweight people were traditionally and regularly discussed and portrayed as a target of abuse and scorn. Could this body positive turnover be causing even more health issues and causing people to embrace and feel comfortable with their own overconsumption of sugar. It is not normal or healthy to support unhealthy habits. And no, I mean, body positivity is huge in our society, right? So
Yeah.
this goes beyond a physical or mental even. This is a cultural moment. I maybe have two questions here, but what about other countries? Were you able to research into maybe sugar consumption in other countries versus the United States, how that, maybe the stats, what that plays out, what that looks like? I'll just stop there and then I'll ask my other question.
Okay.
later.
Yeah. So I did research that. It was really hard to find specific statistics relating to actually the amount of sugar they eat compared to like their overall like well-being. That was really hard to find. But in one of the books that I read, she was talking about how, now this doesn't per se relate to sugar exactly, but like all processed foods as a whole, in like, what's it called? Cultures where they haven't, like no processed food or sugars have been brought in at all, they are so much healthier and happier. They have white teeth, white eyes. They function so much better as a society. And I think that's just really interesting when you compare that to America, just with our culture of sugar, and that's all we're consuming, really. So, yeah.
So, let me ask you my second then. Is there hope? Is hope lost? I mean, if we are so bound and determined on this body positivity, and we're comfortable with our overconsumption of sugar, but yet it seems to me that we need to be educating, especially in our younger kids, or maybe our parents, right, to be able to teach the sugar does this. Where's the hope right here? Do you see hope as you research this?
I mean, I think so. I think that the main problem is that a lot of people, they just don't realize how much of a problem it is. They think that, oh, I'll just have like a Diet Coke or whatever, and that's so much better for me. And it's definitely not. It's still sugar no matter what. It still affects your body badly. But I think that people are starting to realize that just even like it's really not healthy to be so body positive. I think that there's a difference. People are starting to realize that there's a difference between obesity and unhealthiness versus the way your body and genetics naturally are. I think those are two whole different things that people are starting to separate a little bit, which is, I mean, I'm hoping that they are at least, and that eventually we'll be able to get away from that. Yeah, and then I think if they even started putting it in schools like the Brown Mills Elementary, if they started implementing things like that, I think that would go a long way.
I mean, even politically speaking, I think we have in our past history of even political leaders stepping up to try to educate, to try to help with the subject of our kids' focus, right? Our kids' focus. You mentioned sweeteners.
Yeah.
Stevia. I mean, to be honest with you, our family has used that in the past, right? I'm curious, as for your research, I have my thoughts and opinions, but I'm curious on your research, are those kind of sweeteners worse than sugar, or on the same level, or are they just not as bad?
So I actually did mention this in my paper. Oh, here it is. So they're really not any better for your body than other sugars. They give your brain a reward like regular sugars, but the reward to your brain is lessened because artificial sugars don't carry calories, and they don't have any glucose, so your brain's not getting that energy either. So that makes your body is tricked in eating even more of these sugars, and you're eating even more, and it'll make you eat even more calories in general because your brain doesn't think you're eating anything because there's no calories in it. So I don't think it's any better for your body, but yeah. I think it's all sugar. It's all not better for you. I would say honey is a little bit better for you just because it does have some nutritional values. But on the other hand, it has extreme amounts of concentrated fructose, which counteracts it a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things studies that I had looked into back in the day was some of these sweeteners, and I'm wondering if you found anything as well. Some of these sweeteners actually have a negative effect on your body. So, for instance, the diet sodas, the things they put in the diet soda take sugar out, but to make it still sweet, actually turns into formaldehyde within your body. I'm just kind of wondering if you have noticed any of those stats or any of those things. I don't want to drink formaldehyde,
Yeah.
I don't want to be preserved like that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I know I didn't find any studies about that. That's really interesting. But I do know that, like, aspartame, that's terrible for you. It can give you cancer. I mean, everything can give you cancer. But I was writing about stevia and aspartame in one of the last paragraphs of my paper. And I said, consuming artificial sugars can also lead to abnormal pancreas functioning and insulin levels, along with changes in other functions that change the body's metabolism, putting your body at risk for illnesses such as type 2 diabetes. So it can cause like a lot of health problems, I think, which is just as much as other sugar, maybe even more. So, yeah.
I found it fascinating, the use of companies, how they identified how addictive sugar is and put trace amounts in their products. And you have a lengthy list here. What would you say to companies, and how would you educate the public? And is there anything legal you would try to curb some of
Yeah.
that?
Well, that's interesting that you said that, because a lot of countries actually, a lot of products that a lot of companies in America put in our food, a lot of those ingredients are illegal in other countries. So I don't know that this is very political, but I don't know that they should ban ingredients per se, but at the same time, if you can ban like marijuana and whatnot, then why can't we ban sugar? You know what I mean?
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I don't know about putting bans on it, but I think educating people that companies are doing that. There are people who their jobs are literally dedicated to making us addicted to their products. So that's why sometimes people will be like, well, why can't I get away from this food? Like, why can't I stop eating it? Like, it's literally not your fault. Like, people's whole careers are dedicated to making you want to eat that product. Yeah, but
Do you think companies should be required to state on their packaging, instead of just hidden in the ingredients,
right.
and we have to find it, do you think they should have to clearly state and announce, this has dextrose in it, this has
Yeah.
MSG in it, this has...
I think they should, but I mean, clearly they found ways to get around it. So at the same time, I don't know how helpful that would be, but I think they should. Yeah.
So in this age of conspiracy theories, sugar really is a conspiracy, just like nicotine and cigarettes and so forth, to sell more product? Is that kind of where you're going with that?
It's quite possible.
Pretty much?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like what you said. Like, people used to think the cigarettes were good for you, and I mean, maybe in a few decades, maybe people will start realizing that maybe this shouldn't be something that we're over-consuming. Hopefully.
It seems like every so often, every 10 years, we get different information.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Eggs are good for you, they're bad for you.
Right.
This is good, no, this is bad. And I wonder if that same trend will take place here with sugar. With that, we have so many fad diets, right?
Right.
So many things, and just speaking on a personal level of that, you mentioned the diet of even keto, kind of an idea of the low carbs and what have you. I remember my doctor looking at me that day and telling me no more fruit. And if you're going to eat a fruit, you need to eat this particular, like a blackberry and a raspberry kind of an idea. I love bananas. He's like, yeah, sorry, too much sugar to be able to translate into that. Do you see any trends, I guess, historical trends of, yes, it's good, no, it's bad, yes, it's good, and maybe an unfair question, but can you project out there into the future? Based on your research, can you see where maybe these fad diets today will just be like, no, actually we do, because you made a great point that we do need sugar. We do need it to function. We do. We can't just cut it all out. So have you seen any historical trends in this side of it with sugar going, yes, we do, no, we don't, yes, it's
Yeah.
okay, it's horrible?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about like way, way back Bible times. I don't know about that. But like, I know that like with the beginning of like the slave trade, it became really popular. And then once like grocery stores and stuff like that started getting introduced, it became even more popular. And then with like holidays and whatnot, I think it's just gone up and up and up, like more and more sugar. But even like back in like historic times, like everyone talks about Marie Antoinette wanting cake, like, you know what I mean? Like it's always been a big thing, like sweets and desserts and sugar, like it's just how it is. So I don't think that's necessarily ever going to go away, because I think it's just part of human nature. But I think diets will always be a thing. People will always be trying to get healthy or not, or yeah, But I think maybe in the next few years, maybe people will. I think people know that sugar is bad for you for the most part. They just don't know why. So.
I found the history on the first few pages interesting. You just mentioned the slave trade and how these things swing back and forth. Sugar was very costly in human labor and social impact. It was very costly to obtain in earlier centuries. It was the sugar itself that had high value for that reason. It seems at some point here, as you discussed it, that there were, the sugar itself became cheaper, more plentiful, easier to get, and then the use of sugar was not so much directly, the value of sugar was not directly the sugar, but what it could be as an additive to sell more processed foods and so forth. Is that kind of where that's at today? Is sugar cheap to make and get or to obtain and
Yeah,
get?
it's very cheap. I think, too, just like we have a lot of factories that makes it easy to get things, like just in stores and stuff, so it's very cheap. Yeah.
So the social impact has shifted from centuries past with everything from slavery to forced labor, that kind of thing, and now it's affecting the consumer,
Yes.
negatively affecting the consumer rather than the producers.
Yeah, I think it's almost interesting because it's like we became a slave to sugar ourselves. It like
You put
went
that
full
line in,
circle.
I thought that was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That was very clever.
and you encourage us all to reduce our sugar intake by 25%. What would your strategies be to accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person. It depends on what their diet looks like, because for some people, they might already be there, just depending on the person. But I think just, especially making sure you're eating right away, and not starting your day off with sugar, because that makes a big impact of, like, if you're eating like a Pop-Tart for breakfast or a bowl of cereal, then your body's gonna keep wanting that sugar. The more sugar you eat, the more sugar it wants. So if you start off your day with that, then your body's gonna want more and more of it. So just starting your day off with like proteins and like eggs or yogurt or whatnot. And then just keeping your blood sugar steady throughout the day. I know like whenever I go off sugar personally, the first few days are always the hardest. You just have to get through it. And then eventually you'll be fine. But whenever sugar is presented to you, you're going to want to eat it, which that's the hardest part. You should say yes sometimes, just because you're never going to escape it. But I think just reducing it a little bit each day, that would help a lot.
If there is one product that someone should just cut out immediately, what would you say that should be?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Percentage.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably just processed foods in general, just as much as you can. I can't think of any specific product, but there's probably a lot.
It's just staggering that you've mentioned that we consume 6 cups of sugar a week.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm quoting that right.
Yeah, and that's an average, which means for some people it's even more. Yeah. Yeah.
So no sugar frosted flakes for you, huh?
Nope. No.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the paper. Grace, you did a very good job of developing your case and moving across the spectrum from the history, the culture, the dietary aspects, and moving it on to the kind of the metabolic, biochemical. So it was a very convincing argument.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You've referenced this, but I want to thank you. I love this topic anyway. It's fun to talk about people on two different sides of it.
Yeah.
But you've already referenced it. I just want to pull it out. I loved your statement here. I think this is probably a massive statement for your entire paper. It is ironic how sugar began with slavery. Now almost all Americans are a slave to sugar with their bodies in a whole different way. Thank you for pulling a lot of this out in stats and studies. I think you just knocked it out of the park. You did a phenomenal job with presenting here today, and it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have donuts in the foyer. Thank you, Grace, for everything.
Thank you.
All right, and this concludes our senior thesis day. So thank you to both of our participants today. Great job. You did it. You're done.